Because of greed, Marcus Licinius Crassus died when his enemies poured molten gold down his throat. The credibility of this story is still debatable, but it perfectly symbolizes the greed of Rome's richest man. Crassus was so wealthy he paid off Caesar's enormous debts and could appoint senators who did his biddings. Puppet master Crassus joined forces with Julius Caesar and Pompey to form the first triumvirate. He had wealth, power, armies, and could indulge himself like a king till the end of his days. Instead, Marcus Licinius Crassus wanted more. He waged war and eventually fell at the feet of greed. Welcome to Uncharted History, and join us as we uncover how Crassus accumulated unimaginable wealth thanks to greed, and then lost it all because of it. Chapter 1. Not So Humble Beginnings. Born in 115 BC Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus was part of a family who looked poor on the outside but controlled vast armies and wealth in the background. The Licinia family had 3 sons. Crassus was the middle child of Publius Licinius Crassus and Venulea. Publius served as a senator, a consul, a censor, and even received a Roman triumph ceremony for his military achievements. According to Plutarch, despite their success, the family lived in a modest house, and both of Marcus's brothers were married while their parents were still alive. There was no room for excess, so the 3 brothers and their 2 wives ate at the same table. Befitting, since all 3 brothers were not hungry for food, but power. The eldest, also named Publius, died in the Italic War, fought from 91 to 87 BC. Marcus's father and younger brother fell after the Bellum Octavianum, a Roman civil war, in the winter between 87 and 86 BC. Alone and fatherless, Crassus was forced to flee, finding protection in Hispania, modern-day Spain and Portugal, in 87 BC. Chapter 2. A Fortune Bathed in Blood. With his family gone, Crassus inherited 300 talents from his father, which he used to amass an army of 2,500 men. For context, sources about the value of a talent vary, but according to the classical scholar William Watson Goodwin, 1 talent was worth around $1,000 in 1885. Adjusted to today's inflation, that would equal around $30,000 per talent. This means Crassus inherited a fortune of around $90 million. Lucky him. Using his wealth and his father's odd political alliances in Spain, Crassus gathered an additional 500 men. Now his total army equaled 3,000 men strong. But why the need for so many men? Well, in 84 BC, at age 31, Crassus went to Greece, where he met with the future Roman dictator Sulla. Crassus, Pompey, and Sulla joined forces and defeated their enemies at the Battle of the Colline Gate in what would later be named Sulla's Second Civil War in 82 BC. This victory cemented Sulla on the Roman throne. Because Crassus and his army played a deciding role in the outcome, the self-appointed dictator was generous toward his new ally. Sulla spent his time in office persecuting enemies of the state. As the new dictator, he confiscated their property using proscriptions. Sulla's allies, Crassus being one of them, would buy these proscriptions from the state for a bargain and resell them. For example, villas worth 1,000 gold pieces were bought for 100 or less. During the war, Crassus's 300 talents grew to 7,100 talents. That was equal to 229 tons of silver, which today is worth an estimated $215 million. And with this capital, Crassus started buying Roman proscription properties. Chapter 3. Greed and Avarice. Vices for Wealth. Crassus became Rome's biggest proscription landowner, valued at 200 million sesterces, which would be roughly around $100 million. More impressive still is the timeline in which Crassus achieved this. The expansion began shortly after 82 BC and actively continued until 71 BC. All of his fortune was invested in proscription properties from banished enemies of the state. Crassus strategized a wealth scheme containing 3 phases. Phase 1. Prescription purchase. Crassus bought prescription land and properties in the heart of Rome for next to nothing. He then turned around and sold those same villas at market value, the majority of which was profit. At one point, Crassus's greed and avarice got so extreme that he began visiting Licinia, a virgin priestess of the goddess Vesta. People thought Crassus was having an affair with the Vestal, but he was attracted by something else, her villa. You see, Licinia owned a prime piece of land in Rome. Because she refused to sell, Crassus visited often, hoping to change her mind. When word got out and rumors about this supposed affair began to spread, Crassus was brought before the Roman court. Avarice convinced Crassus and the judges that his courtship was innocent, and he was acquitted. He stopped only after buying the property from the Licinia for a low price, just as he intended. Phase 2. Skilled slaves. Crassus learned that he could invest the profits from his real estate fortunes in skilled slave labor. At the time, Rome's slave labor was divided. Some were ordinary workers, while others were builders and architects. Crassus only bought the second kind. After purchasing around 500 skilled slave workers, Crassus began buying old, decrepit properties that were damaged during the war. Using free slave labor, Crassus would rebuild the houses and sell them for tremendous profit. This paved the way for the third and most lucrative phase of Crassus's wealth formula. Chapter 4. The world's wealthiest fire brigade. Throughout history, being a firefighter has rarely been associated with high pay, except if you were part of Crassus's famous fire brigade. As Rome became the Mediterranean center for art, culture, and prosperity, people flocked to the empire's capital. Unable to house the ballooning population that was reaching 1 million, the city built insulae. These cheap and ancient apartment buildings were poorly made and likely to collapse in the case of a fire. This made fires commonplace in Rome, devastating many Roman families. However, Crassus saw an opportunity in the people's despair. He would often purchase the burnt house, and using his army of slaves, he would rebuild it. Crassus would then either sell the house or lease it to the old owners, making the victims his tenants. Crassus later formed the world's first fire brigade, but this one wasn't free. As the house was burning down, Crassus and a group of slaves would rush to the scene. Using diabolical negotiation tactics, he would either buy a burning house and put out the fire, or he would wait for the property to burn to the ground and buy it from the owner afterward. His architects and builders, along with the newly formed fire brigade, made Crassus a fortune of 200 million sesterces, which is equal to $20 billion. The Licinians' golden arm was now ready to start reaching for military fame. Chapter 5. Military might and political power. Despite already holding the title of the richest man in Rome, Crassus's insatiable greed drove him to seek further wealth, this time through military campaigns. Spartacus, a former gladiator emboldened by the defeat of the Roman army in the past, organized a revolt in 73 BC. With the Roman army deployed, Marcus Licinius Crassus was tasked to end the revolt using his 10-legion army. To help him, the Republic assigned Pompey, a driven young man with a military mind. After inevitably defeating Spartacus in 71 BC, Crassus and Pompey achieved military fame and were elected consuls in 70 BC. Crassus hated sharing the spotlight and felt betrayed by Pompey. In the 15 years that followed, Crassus focused his attention on politics. Being a savvy investor, Crassus bought Roman senators. And what did these senators do for the person who paid for their career? The only thing they could do: enact laws that favored Crassus's political agenda. In the meantime, a promising politician by the name of Julius Caesar caught Crassus's attention. Charmed by Caesar's brilliance, Crassus not only funded his election to Pontifex Maximus, but he even supported Caesar's military campaigns. Crassus became famous for paying off Caesar's debts. For the loan, he was repaid in political favors by Julius. At the same time, Crassus received the title of censor in 65 BC. As time went on, Crassus and Caesar's relationship grew stronger. Together with Pompey, Crassus and Caesar formed the first triumvirate in 59 BC. Because the Senate vetoed many laws Crassus, Caesar, and Pompey proposed, their alliance was formed in secrecy. The three politicians leveraged each other's power and influence to to further their political goals. However, unbeknownst to Crassus, the triumvirate would become his downfall. Chapter 6. The Beginning of the End. Crassus's greed never subsided. He sought military fame more than ever, even at the tender age of 60. The triumvirate's 3 members received provinces to rule over. Caesar went to Gaul, Pompey got Spain, and Crassus was awarded Syria, the wealthiest of the 3 provinces. In 55 BC, after his second consulship, Crassus left for Syria in November. The eastern province was considered a source of inexhaustible wealth, but instead of money, Crassus wanted military glory. He decided to invade Parthia with the help of Aristocracy II, the king of Armenia. In Crassus's mind, conquering Parthia would mean matching Caesar and Pompey in military victories. In 53 BC, aided by 10,000 armored horses and 30,000 infantrymen from the Armenian king, Crassus led his legions across the Euphrates into Parthian territory. But his mission was doomed to fail. First, he crossed the Euphrates River instead of going through Armenian territory. Second, the Roman troops were no match for the strong Parthian horse archers. To make matters worse, Crassus's army found itself in the desert with no water. At the battle near Karhay, modern-day Haran in Turkey, the Parthian army delivered a devastating blow. After narrowly escaping with his life, Crassus attempted to broker a peace with the enemy. What do you think the Parthians would do to a person like Crassus with no bargaining power? They poured molten gold down his throat, according to some records. Others claim the Parthians captured and killed Crassus along with the rest of his army in 53 BC. Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man, died at the age of 62. Crassus's insatiable hunger and hubris forever changed history and embroiled Rome in a conflict that lasted 250 years. We don't know if greed is the downfall of man, but we do know that greed was the downfall of this man, Marcus Licinius Crassus. This was Uncharted History. We'll see you next time.